Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm your own Karen. And my guest for this episode is John Robson, who is a software engineer in the Reading Web team at the Wikimedia Foundation. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad we finally get to chat.
Yeah, definitely. Where do you live, first of all?
So right now I'm actually in San Francisco in the United States. Funnily, so I was originally in the UK, near London. And when I joined the Wikimedia Foundation, the whole, most of the staff were in San Francisco. So I kind of moved over there to be close to them, so, could work quite closely with my work colleagues. But now I'm actually the only member of my team in San Francisco. It's kind of changed a lot. I mean, I've been here a while, so it's, this is over 8 years, but it's now very remote.
Yeah, that's really funny. Wait, so you've been there for 8 years now?
Yeah, since 2012 is when I moved over. So I started off as a remote contractor. But yeah, I wanted to be embedded with all the other team in San Francisco.
Sure, and then they all left.
Yeah. Those are days.
Yeah, so how American are you at this point?
I think I'm in America enough, my language has definitely changed. Usually I go out to the UK, someone's going to point out at the moment I use the word garbage, trash instead of rubbish, as we like to say.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I've got to the point where I start to doubt my own British English words. It's like maybe grey should be spelled that way. Maybe crisp is a bit of a weird word. Maybe potato chip sounds a bit better. So, but my wife's actually Singaporean, so I'm also having this kind of competing element to my language. So in Singapore they have this thing called Singlish. It's like English, but it's got a Singaporean take on it. So yeah, my language is getting very strange right now, my English language.
Man, wow, it's just a mess at this point, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Do you say brilliant or awesome?
I think I'm probably still saying brilliant.
That's good. Actually, I think brilliant makes more sense. Awesome is a bit grandiose, I think, for the way most.
Yeah, it depends on the situation again, but it's good to have options. I feel that's one of the nice things about British English. We have so many ways to say certain things. For example, if you're tired, you can be knackered, or you can be exhausted, or shattered. And here it seems like so many limited options,
That's true. So how did you originally get started with Wikimedia or Wikipedia? Do you remember some point where you thought that this is what you should be doing with your life?
Yeah, so my first kind of jobs outside my university degree was Airbus and British Telecom. So two big organizations with a lot of institutional knowledge. And I was actually the knowledge management department in Airbus. So I was actually concerned with, this knowledge, how do we make sure people get the right knowledge when they know the right person to help with a problem? So I think from an early out in my career, wikis were kind of an obvious answer to a lot of that. Let's get this on a wiki, rather, in a central place where people can look up this information. And over time, I gravitated into a team in British Telecom called Osmosoft, which was run by a guy called Jeremy Ruston, who was the creator of TiddlyWiki. Have you heard of TiddlyWiki?
Sure.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, it's basically a web page that can save to itself, which is a wiki. So it's like a personal wiki that you can run on your hard drive. And it was a really interesting project to work on because I'm very relevant now because the good thing about running something on your hard drive is you've got complete privacy of the content. It's up to you who you share that with. You don't have to store it somewhere and pay money to some company who might mine it for advertising means. But that was kind of what got me into wikis and open source, because TiddlyWiki was an open source community, very small compared to Wikimedia, but a lot of very passionate people doing cool things. So yeah, I kind of worked there. At the time, mobile software development was coming a thing, responsive web design. And I guess I just kind of thought, well, what's a big wiki I can work on? Obviously, MediaWiki was the obvious answer, and I had some experience with setting up MediaWiki instances in the past. So yeah, I kind of looked at a mobile website and I thought this mobile website could be a lot better. I want to help out with that, and then I joined the web team at Wikimedia working on MediaWiki.
Wow. Okay, that was 2012.
Yeah, 2012 was when I joined the Wikimedia Foundation. I'm still there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, usually people's stories involve, starting out as a Wikipedia editor and then you get into gadgets and
Yeah,
uh, templates
I
and
started off
various
with
hacks and
technology,
stuff.
I
But
guess.
what?
I started off with the technology, I guess. Like,
Yeah,
looking
sure.
at
Yeah,
technology, thinking
yeah.
this is great. Like, I want to do more of this. Like, yeah, but definitely a
What's
different
the
angle.
right? What's the next Tiddly wiki?
What's the next to do, Wiki?
No,
Oh,
I'm saying
uh,
that was what you asked yourself back in
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
2012.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, Tiddlywiki is still going strong from what I understand.
Yeah,
Um,
there's like I use Tiddy Desktop actually still for personal note taking. It's basically TiddlyWiki inside an Electron wrapper, I believe. I might be wrong. But yeah, I think one of the issues with TiddlyWiki was early on it made took advantages of a few security holes in browsers that allowed file saving.
oh, okay.
Um, and there was kind of talk about file saving APIs in the spec, but not all of those materialized. So it kind of created a few challenges where you needed like a jar file to do the saving. So I quite like the Electron version because it takes care of all that for me. I don't need to worry about like making sure stuff gets saved.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Wait, you created that,
No,
that's
no, no, no. It
okay?
was
Okay. You want yeah?
I
Okay.
just use it. I still use the software that gets better.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never used it, but I mean, it seems pretty neat. Um, yeah, and I mean, a lot of other wiki software has gone over the last 10 years, but that's one of the ones that's still there.
Yeah.
Um, so what is it you do now at the Wikimedia Foundation? I mean, we're going to go over all the, I guess, some of your
Yeah.
previous projects, but
So right now my current projects are desktop improvements, which is a redesign to the vector skin. And basically the desktop experience of pretty much every MediaWiki instance, because a lot of them, or most of them use vector. Um, and then there's a few kind of sub projects that are kind of spun off out of that. So I've been looking at rolling out JavaScript error logging across our projects.
yeah,
Uh, and so basically, like in the 8 years I've been here, we've not been tracking JavaScript errors. I've been very good at tracking PHP errors and fixing them, and not JavaScript. So finally, we have addressed that. There's a lot of infrastructure stuff to work out. So those errors are coming in and trying to work out, like, where we can, which code repositories need attention, and getting those addressed and making sure those get fixed up. And then I guess another kind of sub project that's kind of spun off that desktop work is just looking at skins in general and trying to improve the landscape there to make it easier for people to build skins and to simplify the existing skins we have. So kind of, I guess technical debt would be the kind of umbrella that might come under. So those are the things keeping me
yeah,
busy right now anyway.
yeah. Okay, well, that's that already seems pretty ambitious. I want to ask about all those things. It's interesting with JavaScript errors. I mean, obviously, it's client side. Are you saying basically anytime somebody encounters a JavaScript error, you find out about it? I'm
um,
on Wikipedia or Wikimedia
More or
site.
less, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how technical we're going to get, but, JavaScript has a event handler for errors, like window.onError, like an error occurs and it triggers an event, like, JavaScript is event driven.
Yeah,
So when that happens, we have like a bit of code which says, okay, send this to the server, like with the data, which is useful to debug this. So that would be things like the stack trace, so where the code problem originates from, like the error message itself. And if it's available, like the URL that it came from. So actually one of the advantages of this is we're seeing a lot of issues with gadgets, which is great. Like I think the other day I was just looking at the dashboard and I saw there was like some prominent error that showed up, and I went in and fixed it because I could, like, I have editing rights on wikis. It was like a minor thing. You didn't need to know much about the code. And I
right.
think 2 days later, I saw like, oh no, someone's written on the talk page this, I break it. And it was just someone reporting the error. And like, then there was a comment saying, oh, John's fixed this already. Like, so it's nice that actually, like, I managed to get there before someone else did, just because that error showed up.
Yeah, right, right. Um, that was it on the English language Wikipedia.
I think that might have been Commons.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't remember. There's so many, I don't know, so many wikis, so many different bugs. It's hard to
Sure.
keep track.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that, I mean, are there security, privacy issues there
So,
potentially?
well, firstly, I mean, we restrict this data coming in to people that signed NDAs for that reason. So there is a
Oh,
bit of
okay.
sensitive data, like most of our stuff, right? So we have page views data. There's a lot of information that might be sensitive for IPs, but we do anonymize that and make that available to people. And I think long
Yeah.
term, the hope is we can do the same with this. But for now, because of that sensitive data, we have to kind of restrict its access. But one thing I've been trying to do is like generate like wiki page reports with like de-anonymized data saying here's some bugs that editors can fix. I've got like a meta page where I tend to like list those and ping people. I can probably share that actually if that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll have a link to it from the episode page. We may be on video, not sure yet, but
Maybe,
um,
yeah.
yeah.
We'll see.
Oh, I thought you were gonna share it. Share it. No, it's fine. Yeah, okay. I'll put that URL there. Um, um, yeah,
Oh,
that's
I
really.
should mention people can opt out of this. So, there is a bit of JavaScript that people can include in their user scripts, like if they don't want to be a log4j
Oh, to
developer.
opt out. Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, uh, so yeah, so the rewriting vector, of course, or modifying it is, of course, a huge thing, and I think it's something everybody notices if they go to the mobile site, even though that's not vector, that's Minerva, I guess.
Never, yeah.
Um, Minerva Noi, if you want. I
Mhm.
don't. Was there an original Minerva? I don't know, but
There was actually. So originally, like Minerva, the mobile. I don't know if you want to get into this, but the mobile site, like mobile front end, and Minerva were the same thing. And actually, Minerva was not a skin. It was like I don't know what you describe it like. It behaved like a skin, but from a code perspective, it was not a skin. So a
yeah, okay,
while back, we did break out Minerva from mobile front end into its own skin, so they could use separately. And that was kind of inspired by the work Bartos did on Google Summer of Code, which like I mentored for, but like to be honest, I didn't do much because Bartos kind of knew what it was doing there. Um, but yeah, we spun out Minerva of mobile front end. And because we spun it out, we had the situation where we had the Minerva inside mobile front end, and we had this new Minerva that was going to replace it. So we had to rename it.
yeah, okay,
So that was where the new A came from, anyway.
yeah. Well, yeah, makes sense.
There's a technical reason.
Um, yeah. Yeah. Obviously, everyone can see the differences. And in some cases, there's some big features that are only available in the desktop version and not in the mobile version. You have to, if you're on your phone, you might have to switch to the desktop version to see. I can't remember. There's even like recent changes. I can't remember now. There's various things, even some big things
Yeah,
that are harder to get to or impossible in the mobile view.
yeah. So I mean, when you got to remember, like a lot of these experiences were built like before mobile's even a thing. So like things like recent changes and watch this pretty integral to the media wiki experience. So quite early on, those things were built. So when we went to look at making those mobile friendly, like it wasn't really straightforward. It wasn't a case of just let's throw some CSS on it, we can fix this. It was actually kind of looking at thinking, well, how can we make this experience good? Because we've got all this information here, like the recent changes, tons of information, and like how do we cram that into a tiny screen? Like it didn't really kind of work too well. So with a lot of features, we've had to kind of basically reevaluate them and think, well, if we were building this now, how would we do this?
Yeah.
And that's been a lot of effort, like, and it's been about prioritizing like things that people need. Some of this stuff sadly falls on the wayside. So yeah, this is kind of why there's this divide between like Minerva and like Vector. I mean, I've been involved in Minerva since like its original development, and it's been quite purist in its approach to things. Like it tries not to like if there's a problem rather than kind of like work around that problem. It tries to address it at the heart of the problem, so it impacts other things. So like if you improve the watch list for mobile, you're also improving the recent changes contributions page because they use similar elements.
Oh, okay.
Does
Yeah,
that make
okay. You're
sense?
talking about the interface within each page. Um,
Yeah, Yeah, because I think we talk a lot about like responsive skins, like in like our universe. And actually, like we have responsive skins, like Minerva's responsive, Timeless responsive, and you know, Vector,
Sure.
if you configure it correctly, is responsive. But the issue is actually like a lot of the content that goes into those pages. It's like you know, kind of content from templates, like content of special pages, and that's kind of where it becomes challenging to kind of get that mobile experience like perfect.
Yeah, sure. I mean, within recent changes or within search on the desktop version, there's so many options
Mm.
of how to view the content. You know, being able to select from a bunch of namespaces, or can you view how many days backward can you view and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, a great example is the, I guess, the non-JavaScript editor for MediaWiki. So it tends to have a lot of like edit notices at the top of the page saying like, you know, this is how you edit. Like if you're new, like do this. But if you do that on mobile, like usually you have to like scroll like 3 times, like 3 page
right.
lengths just to get to the text area. So like if you've clicked edit and you don't even see the edit box, like that's going to be a confusing experience.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Um, so yeah. I guess there's also just modifications to the desktop, what you could call vector by itself, which are simplifying, as you said, you know, rethinking the whole thing. And it looks like, from what I've seen, some of that involves um, simplifying the sidebar, for instance, so you don't have this huge list of, I don't know, however many links there are right now in the sidebar. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe putting them all into what's known as a hamburger icon, or that sort of thing, or moving them all elsewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, the language is a big part of that sidebar on the left, and you know we've got a lot of data to show a lot of people kind of ignore that sidebar at this point because there's just so many things in there. It's like I don't know, like they maybe glance at it once and then it just becomes noise. But then you know, language is an important feature. Like you know, a lot of people don't even realize like you know we have languages. So one of the things we're doing in that project is looking at these features and saying how can we make these more prominent and accessible to users. So the languages, we're kind of pulling that out the sidebar and putting it at the top of the page, like under a button that says languages. So if you click, like it just kind of opens like a you know dialogue to allow you to find the language. Um, but yeah, but mostly we're trying to kind of you know retain you know, the content, like the things in there. It's just trying to find a better home for them that makes sense to someone who hasn't you know hasn't used the interface for like 10+ years.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Um, yeah. Some of this gets into Olga Vasileva Vasileva was on this show about a year ago, maybe more, and
Right. Yeah.
we covered some of these same kinds of topics. And she went over, from what I remember, yeah, you know, the user testing and so forth that's been involved. Has there been any progress on? I
Yeah.
assume you work with her on a,
I do.
on a
Yeah.
fairly
Yeah. We're in the
regular
same
basis, by the
team.
way. Yeah.
I did listen to that Between the Brackets
Oh, really?
episode.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
was at the start of our project. So I think
yeah.
at
Okay.
that point we hadn't started. We were kind of in the research phase, but now like we're like the project is like enabled on some big wikis. So like French Wikipedia and Hebrew Wikipedia have it on by default that you can.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Yeah, I just happened, bizarrely, I just recently was an article on French, not surprisingly, not Hebrew Wikipedia, and I saw that the interface looked totally different. I
yeah, so we have a, if you look at
just
the
couldn't figure out what at that. Yeah,
yes, we have a new
what
search
that was about.
experience there. Like if you search, you get like preview, like image thumbnails for the articles and like a brief description to check that it's the article you're going to read about. What else have we done so far? We've made the sidebar collapsible. So there is this kind of hamburger menu that allows you to collapse it. So you can get out of the way if you're trying
Yeah,
to focus on reading. And then this week we're
but
planning
it doesn't
to,
actually. It doesn't make the sidebar narrower. No, I don't know if that would be useful at all, but right.
it doesn't make this,
It
sorry, I'm
doesn't
not
make the
sure I follow.
yinearrower narrower, but I mean, you know, the width is not. I mean, you're trying to, you don't want to take up the whole screen anyway with the width, presumably for reading purposes.
Yeah, so I think if you collapse the browser window, the sidebar will kind of become full screen and kind of push the content down. So one of the things we are looking at is trying to make Vector a little more mobile friendly. Right now, we're
Oh,
kind of
okay.
working down to 500 pixels because we reckon that's about the window width when someone resizes like their tab to have two side by side for whatever reason. So we're not quite like looking at like making this like mobile friendly, but we're thinking about that quite actively.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, sure. At that point, the vector, it becomes, a fully responsive skin.
It's getting there, not
What?
quite, but
Yeah.
it's getting
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's moving in that direction. Sure. Um, yeah. Okay. So what is this new functionality that's available on some wikis called? Is it still vector or is it?
Yeah, so I mean the way we've kind of the project is called Desktop Improvements, and like quite early on in the project, we had this idea we wanted to create this new experience, and we had this kind of dilemma of like, do we kind of, is this like a new version of Vector, or is it a new version of like the Minerva skin that we're now going to bring to the desktop audience, or is it something completely new which is going to learn from these experiences? So to be honest, I was kind of in this kind of situation in my team where I was in a minority, and I wanted to focus on the Minerva skin because I felt that addressed a lot of the issues with mobile, and I kind of would like us to move towards like a single experience for everyone. I mean, I think it's kind of long term goal.
Yeah.
But I think there was this kind of concern with that. Minerva gets a bit of a bad rap. Like you say Minerva, and I think like, oh, shut up, like Minerva, like mobile front end, like evil, like so it gets a bad reputation. So we didn't really want to be associated with that with the project because this was supposed to be a positive, like, new thing that was gonna, didn't have any baggage. So because of that, there was a big kind of desire in my team to build a new skin. The kind of compromise we came to was like, well, let's build a new skin, but inside Vector, and at the same time, like clean up the Vector skin to make it easier to work with. Because quite early on, we know like when we ship
Yeah.
new skins, not everyone wants to move to the new skin. They want to keep the old experience. They don't like change, or they want to change to go at their own pace. So we kind of
Right.
need to reserve that skin for probably like several years. Who knows how long. We still have Clone Blue and Modern like deployed on Wikimedia servers, and people still use them for whatever reason. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think there was this desire. So
Yeah.
well, let's at least simplify things and make these easier to like maintain in future. So we don't want to get to the situation where we have some bug like that affects all skins, and we have to like modify every single skin to kind of fix that bug.
Right.
So
Wait,
that's
so
kind of what
what?
led to all the architecture stuff.
Yeah, okay. Wait, so what's the answer to the question? What is this new skin called? Is it?
So right now, the way we're thinking of it is a new version of Vector, so it's still called Vector. And the thing that you're looking at, say on English Wikipedia, is called Legacy Vector.
Oh,
I think
legacy.
at
Okay.
I think at some point, like when that project comes to a close, we might think about rebranding. So it's not clear. Like maybe they call Vector Classic the current thing, or maybe the new thing is called Vector 2. So there is a bit of a kind of naming opportunity there, but for our purposes, we want people to think about this is a new version of Vector that we're kind of iterating on, we're evolving this experience.
Yeah,
But
okay.
fundamentally, it's the same.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, Vector Classic and yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm just thinking,
Maybe think too
yeah.
hard.
What? Naming things is very hard. Yeah, it was funny you mentioned the modern skin. That's
Doesn't
always be
age well.
careful to be careful whenever naming anything modern. Um, that's from, I don't know, 15 years ago or more.
Yeah. Although actually, like that code base is now probably like a good example of how to build a skin. So off the back of desktop improvements, some refactoring has happened there. And the skin,
Oh,
the
okay.
code is actually pretty modern at this point. So it's kind of
Oh, it is modern. Okay, well, very good
a
then.
developer in joke. Maybe not from a design perspective, but
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, speaking of responsive skins, of course, there's all sorts of other skins that are responsive. A lot of them are based on what's called Bootstrap. There's also Timeless, the Wikimedia Foundation's, uh, not attempt, just responsive skin. I was going to say attempted a responsive skin, but it works. I don't know if that's based on Bootstrap. I mean, do you have any thoughts on all of the? Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts on all of those? Is this project potentially going to make all of those less necessary?
So it really depends what you. So I think responsive is a buzzword. Like responsive skin is like a buzzword, and responsive web design is a buzzword that's thrown around. But I mean, from a code perspective, essentially what you're talking about there is when you view on a mobile screen, it's going to adapt to your viewport. You're not going to have to like zoom in like around the interface. And content should fit to that kind of, like that screen resolution you're working on. So I think from that perspective, we already have responsive skins, like Timeless does this, Vector does this if you add the right configuration flags. Monobook does this. There's a responsive
Oh,
monobook. I'm not sure if you saw the rollout of that a while back.
had no idea.
Yeah, well, that was an interesting one. So I mean, this kind of to me like was an interesting case study. So I think Asara at the time was the one who worked on this. Maybe there's others involved. But they, made some adaptations to Monobook so it worked on a mobile phone. And I think it was like deployed during one of the Wikimedia hackathons. And then suddenly, like there were so many editors like getting really angry, like the usual thing, blaming the Wikimedia Foundation, even though this is like like several volunteers, because that's the natural thing they tend to
Okay,
editors
yeah,
tend
yeah,
to do. Saying, what have you done? Like it wasn't broken the way it was before. But I think what that revealed is a lot of people don't actually want responsive skins. Like a lot of people are very content with the control you get of zooming in and out of a browser. Like they feel like they can get to things quickly. So I mean, in mobile, if you want to get to the footer, you have like on Minerva, you have to scroll, several like scrolls to get right to the footer if you want something there, for example. But if like it wasn't responsive, you'd probably just zoom out till you're like full, like zoomed out, and then you'd like zoom in on the footer. So I think there's like I can understand why people don't like responsive skins. Like personally, like I think responsive skins tend to be better. I think GitHub is a good example of a site which works really well on a mobile phone up until a certain point. There's like certain features I want to use that I can't or are not very good on the mobile site and have to switch to desktop. And I think Wikipedia is similar. I don't think there's any shame in that. Like I often force
yeah.
myself
Okay.
to work on mobile, but there's occasionally some moments I have to go to desktop because the experience is just kind of better, like when it's not in a screen. But I think the big
Right.
issue, so going back to your question, I think the big issue we have with skins and MediaWiki in general is the content. So, for example, we rely a lot on large data tables, like we say like 20 columns, like with really
Oh,
interesting
okay.
information. But that's never going to work very well on a mobile phone. Like
Right.
no matter what CSS you throw at it, that's still going to be like a bad user experience. Like,
Well, yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, what about it? Okay. What about everything else? I don't know. Okay, fine. Um, uh, no, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying, but that doesn't really point in one direction or the other as far as what the responsive skin should look like, or whether Bootstrap would ever be helpful, that kind of thing.
oh, okay. I mean, so in terms of Bootstrap's like kind of framework, like I don't think that's necessary to build like a responsive site. I think essentially
Yeah.
when you're building a responsive site, what you're talking about is using like CSS targeted at different devices. You might say like, for a screen that's up to 600 pixels, do this. Like for a screen that's over 1,000 pixels, do this.
Right.
So that might be hiding things, that might be rearranging things. And that's certainly something we're thinking about quite constantly, like on the new desktop like experience, a new Vector. We're kind of looking at things and going, well, how does this work at this like kind of resolution? And right now, like we're working off 500 pixels is kind of as low as we go, just because below that we know the design completely breaks down at the moment. But we have
Yeah.
plans in the future to kind of deal with that. So like like hopefully in like 6 months time we can go down to 300 pixels. But even when we get to that stage, there's going to be this issue of content. Like these big tables are not made for mobile. Like, and those are not like our realm. Like we try to stay out of like editorial decisions.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Like we're not going to edit every single template to make it mobile friendly, although like in some cases we've had to do that. So I think like the Minerva site, for example, has its own style to input boxes, which is not great. But I mean, there's just so much editing required there to fix that problem if it's not done that way.
That's interesting. Wait, so how does that work? How does the template knows uh whether it's a mobile view or not, or it has some switch for that?
Um, so So the mobile site, maybe I rephrased this the wrong way. So infobox templates are not made for mobile screens. Like they tend to float right, for example. Like
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So as soon as you put that on any kind of responsive scheme, whether it be timeless or Minerva, like you have an issue. If you tend to get to a situation where the info box is still floated to the right, but maybe there's 10 pixels on the left. So all the text goes up into that space because it can.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Right. Right.
yeah. So what Minerva did, and then Timeless had to do exactly the same thing. Is that, well, we need a solution for this, so I'm going to add some CSS rules inside the Timeless skin or the Minerva skin,
Okay.
specifically
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the correct thing is to go into all those templates. We have template styles now, which is an extension which allows template editors to add CSS like to their template. So
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so historically we use like inline style attributes, which you can't use media queries in. So you can't target different experiences of different users. And template styles, I think, was added to our stack in about 2016, 18, maybe somewhere in that area. But yeah, it hasn't been kind of widely adopted because it's quite scary editing a template that's like used on thousands of page views. So
Sure.
I think there's a lot of catch up to be done there. But hopefully at some point those templates will be mobile friendly and all that code in Minerva and Timeless can be thrown out. And I don't think we've got like a good way of like talking to editors about these sort of changes and getting them done. Like it tends to be like editors look after the content, and then Wikimedia Foundation, Frontier developers look after the code repositories.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, those massively wide tables aren't necessarily all that fun to read on a desktop either.
Yeah,
You know. Yeah. I don't know what the right solution is. Maybe just tell people to have no more than 10 columns per table and create
yeah,
have a whole second table for
yeah, and then that kind of gets into policy changes, right? And making sure editors agree on that and find consensus. And yeah, I mean, it kind of yeah. As a developer, it's not really clear how to kind of impact that process. Like how do
yeah.
there's been times I've gone to talk page and I said this template has an issue on mobile. Here's a
Oh,
suggested
okay.
fix that I
Yeah.
propose for you. And then I've come back with some long essay of why it can't be done that way. And I kind of look at it and go, oh, I know, I kind of want to care
Yeah.
about this, but there's like so many other things I want to care
Right.
about. So I'm gonna like maybe like just I've said my piece. Like
Yeah, you
um
only have so much so much what's the word emotional strength or
flavor,
something
yeah.
to only so many
Yeah.
things you can care about.
Yeah,
No,
you gotta choose your hills to die on, right?
sorry?
Choose your hill to die on, I think
Right,
so.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Um,
yeah,
but
until you can
we had
log
a
in
big
as a
issue.
oh, I was gonna say until you can log in as a super administrator. That's just a joke right there. I forgot it. Yeah,
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
I remember that. Yeah, super
Yeah,
administrator.
okay, yeah, yeah.
I got it.
All right, very good.
um, but yeah, I think the main page is a good example. So the main page is obviously very prominent, and I've kind of been pulled into like kind of mobile issues relating to main pages quite often. As someone who works with the mobile site and has expertise there. But I remember at one point we wanted to make Vector make them. We had some code like in mobile front end, which basically gutted the main page and made it work for mobile. But this didn't really scale very well. So a lot of projects just didn't work. So like you went to their main page and there was like no content whatsoever, which is not great. So we wanted to throw that code out. So to do that, though, we had to go and talk to basically every single project in the Wikisphere about their main page. We used like community liaisons to get their messaging out, and we gave like a long runway. So we're going to do this in about a year's time. And I think that ended up taking like 4 years in the end, and basically involved me editing
Wow.
about 100 main pages, like just to kind of not break them. So it's like, because we just couldn't find the right people to do that, which is not great. And then
Yeah.
the ones where people did care about it, like English Wikipedia, we had some issues where someone was resizing their browser and vector and saying the main page is now going into like one column, like the space for two columns, and so this is not responsive if it does that. So then we ended up kind of having to cater to those users and say, okay, this only applies to the timeless and the Minerva skin. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, there's a lot to kind of get through. A lot of emotional labor, a lot of discussions. Like,
Right.
yeah, hard problem.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Um, um, I guess moving on. Back in December. Well, sort of moving on. You created a site called Wikimedia Skins Lab at
Yeah,
skins.wlflabs.org, um, which is a
yeah.
nice showcase of the existing MediaWiki skins, because it can be hard to see which skins are actually still maintained and still work with the latest MediaWiki version.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's interesting. In the announcement email for it, you wrote something like, "I can't believe there are only 38 usable skins."
But it's 59 now.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's been improvements since that email.
Was it people notifying you about skins that still work, or people actually going in and updating skins to get them to work?
I think a bit of both. So I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
these skins were just not working because like some, we deprecate some like method, like I don't know, in like one of the releases, like I don't know, 1.31
yeah, okay,
release, and then we'd finally remove it in 1.36, and then basically everyone that was using that, like, you still had to migrate this and it broke. So I mean, those skins could technically be made to work. It was just you need to know like how to fix the compatibility issues.
yeah,
So there's a lot of that going on where we try and like fix those skins, and because most of the time it's just replace this method with this method. Like, here's the line of code we use, and use this line instead. I think a few skins did kind of emerge from that though, like not many, but I think there were a few new ones. And I think also, so the main reason I set up that site was because we're working on desktop improvements, the vector skin. I wanted to kind of improve the skinning system overall, just to make it a bit easier to work with. Because when we first built Minerva, like, it was just such a mess. We didn't even build a skin. Like, I think everything was in core at that point, and I said, well,
yeah,
this doesn't quite work for what we're doing, so we're just going to do this thing on the side, and we're kind of pay that off later, which is kind of what we've been doing since. Um, so yeah, I kind of wanted to make changes to, the kind of the foundations, I guess, of like how skins work. But to do that, I needed to understand what skins were out there, like what skins were doing, and make sure I didn't break them. So it was an exercise in basically auditing every skin out there that I was aware of, like working out what was broken already, what was not broken, what could break in future. Yeah, so that's kind of what led me to set up that site, and hopefully it's useful. And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great. No, I looked through it. There were some skins I didn't even know about, or or ones that I'd seen a long time ago, and I was very surprised to see that they still work, or once again work. Yeah, definitely, it's a good resource. So do you find 59 a more plausible number of skins for MediaWiki, or is it still low? I mean, given that MediaWiki is, of course, the
Yeah, I mean,
massively used wiki software.
my guess is that the skins are just not public. So I know like MediaWiki is used a lot on like internal sites. I'm sure they have like skins of some sort, whether they might be like hacked versions of Vector or something else. So I think there's an element of that, but I do think the number is pretty low. But I think my kind of gut says the reason why that's low is because there's quite a few barriers to creating a skin. So I did an interesting exercise at one of my team offsites a few years back, where I asked everyone in the room like to stand on one side, and I said, like, sit down if you don't know how to do this.
Oh,
So it's kind
okay.
of questions like, sit down if you can't code PHP. Like, suddenly, like, the people that can write skin is reduced. And actually, I think at the end of the exercise,
Yeah.
no one was standing up.
No
Like,
one was
there
standing.
was a,
Right, right. That's not surprising.
so,
Yeah.
so I mean, you could build a skin if you had like people with the right necessary skills, like, or did some learning. But there was a bit of a barrier there. And we have things like resource loader, which you kind of need to know to write about. And if you want to build front ends, maybe you need to know about OUI, and not many people necessarily know about that. So I think there was some kind of unnecessary barriers, and I think we've simplified some of those. I mean, the biggest horror I had when we first started this project was like there was like 20 ways to add something to a menu, like 20 different hooks you could use. something like that. Like, and one of the first things we wanted to do is, okay, let's simplify this. Let's have like one hook. Like, if you're gonna add a item to like this menu, like use this hook. Like, don't use anything else. Like, it's be much better.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of I think a lot of the custom skins out there, just from my experience, are based on some of the bootstrap based skins like Tweaky or Chameleon
Yeah, yeah,
Foreground, which I think are also easier to modify
yeah.
than Vector and stuff. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, it's easier to make something that looks completely different, I think.
Yeah, I mean the citizen skin was probably the most interesting one I found on during that audit. Like it just looks so different from other skins. I've got a link here actually. Like, and if you can fix that, but
oh yeah, I'm looking at it now from
yeah, but
your
the skin,
skins
like I
repository,
just
right?
I find this one really interesting. It looks very modern. Like it's still MediaWiki, and it's not doing anything crazy in the back end to make this work. So I want to see more skins like this, like really ambitious ones, like that people like want to add on their wikis. Because I think the more
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like there was a time in my life when I thought wiki travel was like associated with Wikipedia just because it looked like it. That was before like I kind of got into the community. So I think there should be more diversity in skins. I think it's important for things like branding and making sure like because if you don't like a certain site, maybe that connotation carries over to some other website.
Yeah, you're saying you're hoping that more non-Wikimedia skins use something other than Vector, so it's clear that they're not
Yeah.
Wikimedia.
And to be honest, I'm quite excited about the fandom move towards, going back to the fold, like the MediaWiki fold. Like, I'm really hoping when that happens, we're gonna see some more skins pop up in the ecosystem, or
Oh
like
yeah,
improvements to
okay.
existing skins. I hope so. Anyway,
Sure.
we're supposed to.
Right, yeah, yeah. Um what was I gonna say? I'm sorry, I'm looking at all these other skins. Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously there's some people that want Wikimedia that want. Oh my God, I just made the Wikimedia Wiki error. That want MediaWiki, because people are used to the look and feel of Wikipedia, so they want it. They don't see anything wrong with it looking as much as
Yeah,
possible, like Wikipedia with Vector and everything else.
yeah, but I think there's subtle things we could do, right? I think if the skin and system was in a better state, I'd hope it'd be nice if you could configure like things like colors, for example. Say, I want like black as my theme or yellow as my theme. Like maybe MediaWiki.org has a kind of yellow tint to it. I think
Yeah.
it'd be great to get to that place though, where you've got skins, but like slight variations of those skins that are easy to maintain.
Yeah, that would be great if you could define a color palette, and the skin just requests has some array of, I don't know, 5 or 7 or whatever it is colors, and you can just
Yeah.
modify that array.
Yeah, I think Volker might be a good person to. Volker Eckel, he's been doing a lot in that kind of area around standardizing the way we, define CSS like across our projects. I know he definitely has like thoughts on that. He recently just built a night mode gadget as well, which is kind of cool.
Oh, cool. Who is this?
Volker Eckel, he's the
Oh,
Wikimedia
okay.
Foundation.
Volker Eckel.
But
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is something he thinks about a lot.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Uh, you mentioned, I guess, moving on from skins. Um, Although, skins really covers a lot of stuff. But you mentioned OOUI, which is the current JavaScript based user interface library, and it stands it sort of stands for object oriented JavaScript user interface, sort of. But it replaced jQuery UI, and now there's a chance that it too will be replaced. About a year ago, there was a decision to start using this very popular JavaScript framework called Vue.js.
Yeah.
And even the creator Evan Yu, or however his name is pronounced, got involved in that. Yeah. So they're using it at least, or I should say, you're using it at least in a limited way or an experimental way. Um, and now there's something called WVUI, the Wikimedia
Hmm.
View user interface. Speaking of naming, speaking of problems with naming, hopefully that'll get a
uh,
better name. But um, which I guess may take the place of OOUI. Are you involved in that, in any of that in any way?
yeah. The short answer, yeah. So it's been a long journey though. When I joined the foundation in 2012, there wasn't really a good solution for front end, like what to use. I think Bootstrap was kind of the popular thing at the time, as a framework. But I think Visual Editor like was being built at the time, and that had a lot of like unique challenges that were not really covered by the existing frameworks. So OOUI kind of came out of that work. Um,
Yeah.
so I think the hope with them was that we were going to use this, but I think one of the challenges we had was because OUI had been built with this product in mind, like it was kind of very good at that product, but when you applied it to other things like mobile, like it didn't quite work. And maybe like Visual Editor was mostly targeted at desktop back then. So it's like I know you want like something that works on mobile. You need to go into that code base and adapt it to make it work. So for whatever reason, like we didn't end up adopting that library because we had to build stuff and it wasn't quite fit for purpose at the time. And I think a lot of that was true for a lot of other teams. Like they had things they had to build, they had to kind of work around the fact that there was no kind of good kind of solution for everyone. And I think this has kind of snowballed over the last few years. And I think we've had a lot of issues with people coming in to the organization who, have looked at our front end and just haven't known how to be productive because, the good thing about things like React.js and Vue.js is they have huge communities. Like the documentation sites are like brilliant.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people looking at them. And that's certainly something we've just seen. Actually, we just hired someone new, and they hit the ground running because they came in, they knew we're using Vue, and they basically read up like on how Vue works. Like
Okay.
they were writing like Vue code within the first week. And I think the problem we've had in the past is like the OUI documentation. For understandable reasons, it's not as good as those libraries, and it's not going to be as good because it's there's fewer people. Like the foundation, our movement is very small compared to say like people using like Vue.js. So I think documentation has been a big challenge there, and hopefully we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping with Vue.js that it's going to at least kind of allow people to feel more effective and involved from early on, not feel like these barriers. Like I need to learn this thing first and what it's doing.
Yeah. Okay. Um, there's nothing that I don't know if there's anything officially that states the plan is to move from OOUI to WVUI or whatever it's called. But I mean, is that the plan?
I think that's the plan, but I think there's definitely some challenges for like products that are highly invested in that. You just have to look at the media key like stack, and there's still things using jQuery UI, particularly in gadgets, and it's not really clear how to remove those from the stack without breaking those gadgets. And I think probably we've erred on the side of caution, like mostly where we don't like to break gadgets if we can avoid it. But it does mean we kind of have this baggage like hanging around. Like I think jQuery UI is still loaded on all pages on like certain projects just because they have like a site-wide gadget enabled which uses it, and that has impact on things like performance. It's not great.
Right. Yeah. It's time to.
That's what happens when you let people run JavaScript.
Sure. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, what's the lesson there? I don't know. Yeah, it's time to rip the Band-Aid off, I guess.
Yeah, but I think one of the nice things about the Vue.js move is like we've got every team has kind of got someone in there thinking about this from their angle and like involved in the creationist library, which, as I said in the past, we've not really done that. So I think we're starting from a situation where we're kind of thinking about all the projects and the bigger picture rather than like we need to get this project out the door. So I think when you kind of decouple those like timelines, like the deliverables, like from that work, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm excited. It's nice to see, and if there's a good momentum in the foundation right now around porting stuff over. Yeah, exciting times for the front end.
Oh, porting stuff over to WVUI
Yeah, not necessarily WVUI. So WVUI is
or
a
just
component
Vue?
library. So the idea there is like if there's common elements to every product, like a button, for example, like most often like a user interface will have a button. So rather than create that button yourself, you use one from the shared library, pick it off the shelf and use that. So that's what Wikimedia Vue UI is trying to be. But I think you can build stuff in Vue.js without using that. It would just make your life a lot easier if you use things that are already kind of had design review, design scrutiny, and accessibility scrutiny, internationalization scrutiny. It's going to be a lot better.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the middle of a big project to get page forms over to OOUI. I've already I and some other people have already gotten rid of all the jQuery UI stuff, which took a
That's
while.
great.
And now the next step is to move over a bunch of HTML inputs and so forth also into
Right.
OOUI. Yeah, some of it
Yeah.
ends up. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I say I feel like that's like our job as engineers these days. I think most engineers are porting something that some other engineer made at some point. Like it seems like that's our kind of job, is like keeping things up to date and making sure stuff evolves. Like the web platform is evolving, for example. So sometimes like so one thing that I'm kind of got my mind on is like lazy loading images has become part of the native platform. There's a few kind of kinks in it that need to be worked out. But in future, like we have code in the mobile site which makes lazy load images possible. So by that I mean images like only load when you scroll to them. So that's an example where we can
Okay.
throw code out and rely on the platform, like because the platform is evolving, it's getting better. And I think likewise, it's just part of being an engineer. Like you have to be in situations where you port like something from jQuery UI to OUI or React.js to Vue.js or Vue.js to whatever's next. Like that's kind of the world we
Sure.
live in.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that specifically, what you're saying. Actually, well, before that, there's another potential project that's potentially like that. That also involves porting that you've written about, which is moving away from Resource Loader, which you mentioned before, to something called Webpack, which is a standard as opposed to Resource Loader, which is specific to MediaWiki. You wrote about that a while ago. Is that still an ongoing project? Is that still something
Yeah.
people are talking about?
So I don't think resource loader is going away anytime soon. I think there's a lot of things it does really well, specific to like our needs, in particular, like, really gives us control over performance. It is a bit of a concern because I think like the understanding of that, it's a complex component and the understanding is not necessarily shared across the organizations. I think there's definitely places we can improve there. But yeah, I think like when you talk about stuff like Webpack, like really you got to understand why people want to use that. And a lot of the reasons to use like a JavaScript bundler like Webpack are to use like more modern JavaScript, like not worry about kind of abstract away kind of concerns about kind of older browser support. It might be to use something that's like TypeScript, like to provide like type check into your code, which makes you a better developer, makes you more productive. It might be making, like letting the bundler take care of optimizations for you, like getting rid of code that's not actually ever being executed, so you don't have to kind of worry about those concerns. So I think right now there's a group of people thinking about how build steps like work in our ecosystem. So right now we do use build steps in a few repositories like pop-ups, mobile front end, Wikimedia Vue UI I think uses that as well, and they kind of use them for different reasons. But one of the annoying things about, at least for mobile front end pop-ups, is because of the way we do releases, the way we deploy code, we have to commit the built assets. So we run the bundler, which basically takes a bunch of code as input and then outputs like the single JavaScript file to run like to users. But then we have to commit that because the build process is not aware of that step. So if we want that code to run at all, we need to put it in the code repository. And that's not great because that file basically changes every time you touch JavaScript. You end up having like rebase conflicts every time you're trying to build stuff, and it doesn't feel like a great situation. And there's also security implications with something like Webpack because it can pull down code from like npm, and which you've not vetted, and then run that without you. There's a potential for security like leaks to happen. So basically, that's not perfect. We want to find a better way of doing this, the one that kind of fits in with our values, but also helps us be more productive as engineers.
Okay. But is Webpack still the state of the art, or is there something else that's?
I think we're kind of leaning away. We're leaning away from Webpack and looking at other solutions, but I don't think any decisions being made there. But I think we're probably going to favor a bundler which does the minimum possible in terms of like concatenating code and optimizing code.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see. I'm
sure.
actually involved in this conversation. We're very interested in what comes out of it.
Right. Yeah. So yes. Just speaking in general about porting code and technical debt and all of that. You wrote a blog post about 2 years ago in March 2019. That was called "How We Tackled Technical Debt at Wikipedia," and it covers some of what we've talked about. I actually wanted to ask not about that blog post, but about the post you wrote on Twitter to publicize that blog post. And you wrote, here's what you wrote. I believe strongly that in a decade from now, much of software engineering is going to be about fixing code bases that were built in this era.
Yeah.
We as engineers have to get better at talking about technical debt. Yeah, do you remember writing that? Probably.
I do remember writing that. Yeah, it still holds true.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've never talked before, but I remember reading that post at the time, and you may be surprised to hear this, but it's actually sort of stuck with me ever since. I've had two different reactions to reading that post. When I first read it, I remember thinking, no offense, this is just a typical clueless tech guy on Twitter who's pontificating about the future.
Thinking out loud.
Right. Yeah. Just wanting to hear himself think or something. Who's to say what things people will be working on 10 years from now? But reading it now, I actually think you were being way too optimistic, if that's the word, and that we're actually fully in code refactoring mode at this point. Just 2 years later, maybe even a year, maybe even a year ago already. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when the last actual new feature was added to MediaWiki or any of the Wikimedia extensions depending on what exactly you mean by new is meant by new features. But it seems to me like it's all or mostly performance improvements, coding improvements, getting rid of global variables, that kind of thing. And more generally, I don't know what's going on with the bigger web world and WordPress and Drupal and so forth, but I certainly haven't heard of any big new features lately. So basically what I'm saying is I've always thought you were wrong. No, just kidding. But yeah, no, I mean, what do you think about that whole thing? Obviously that's a big topic, but
yeah, where to start? So firstly, I think that there is kind of like we are shipping new stuff. So one of the cooler things I've seen come out recently is the media search on Commons. And if you've looked at that, there's like an enhanced like search experience like for that, which is built with Vue.js.
I'm not sure. I know when you do. I know one of the new features coming is that when you do a search, you can see a little image of each article associated with it, but that might not be what you're talking about.
Not the same. No, that's I can share that link afterwards. But I think that's like an example of something cool that is happening. So I think that stuff is going on. I think probably there's a lot of things going on in niche corners of our universe where like maybe they're not as visible. But yeah, I think the challenge, right, is, I mean, technical debt does hold you back, particularly when like you're not willing to let certain things go. So for example, my team like spent, I think, 3 months like looking at printed PDFs of articles because basically there was like fire going in operations fire in that respect, like a metaphorical fire, where basically I had the service generating PDFs, which was just falling over, like, and it wasn't working. It was getting to like emergency levels. I fixed this right away. So like that was 3 months taken away from who knows what to address like some existing product which hadn't been looked after for several years, and the editors, certain editors, and it's, you know, it's always hard to tell whether something is important or not, but some editors were saying this is very important, but it wasn't really clear like what is this important in the grand scheme of things. Like should Wikipedia, MediaWiki be concerned with printing PDFs like, you know, in 2020? Like, is that really like something what our users want? And we're really bad at turning things off. I mean, even like Modern and Cologne Blueskins, like why are those still around? Like there's probably like 1,000 or so users of them. Like, but why are they using them? Like for what reason? Like, is it worth like maintaining those things and taking time away from newer things to look after those? So I think the other challenge is, so you talked a bit about the web platform, and I mean, I've been software developing since 2007 now, I guess, and a lot has changed like during that time. Like, I mean, when I first started out, we were basically making everything work on IE6, and you know, we were doing crazy stuff like we want to use like, you know, the Canvas HTML5 element. Let's look at VML to make this work like an IE6. Thankfully, none of that stuff is work. None of the stuff is concerned anymore. That, you know, I think all that knowledge I learned there is completely irrelevant today. And likewise, like Flash was a big thing back in the day, right? And no longer.
Sure.
So I think like a lot happened in a short space of time. I think, you know, like, and because like we were waiting for that platform to evolve, a lot of kind of technical debt was accumulated so we could build things in the interim. And I think now we're at this point where we need to, you know, catch up. Like the platform is now in a great state. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things you can't do because of the, you know, the technical like code that you've accumulated over the last few years. So I mean, from my perspective, one thing I'd love to do for Wikipedia and MediaWiki is to allow it to work offline, like be installable on your mobile phone, and then, you know, like you're on a vacation, you've not got data access, but you just happen to read like the Wiki Voyage article on Barcelona before you left, and it's still on there, and you can read that. I think that would be a really, you know, great experience, like as a user of MediaWiki. But there's like a lot of stuff in the platform that kind of makes that really difficult to do. So I think we're in this kind of stage now where we just have to get the house in order. We have to kind of turn things off, like even if that's difficult. We have to simplify the way we do things. And I think once we have those kind of nice, like, you know, foundations, we can build like some really cool experiences. I guess this is why the Vue.js stuff is exciting to me, because I think a lot of that is about kind of looking at how we've been building front ends over the last 10 years and coming at it from a fresh perspective, like based on where we are today. And it does seem like a more stable period for like, you know, front ends right now, like touch wood. Like, I feel like there's always like a new front end framework coming out every like, you know, week or so, but at least now it feels like it's been a few years now. Like I think maybe this, you know, React and Vue thing like around here for some time, we're seeing. But who knows, I might be back in 10 years saying, okay, you know, Vue.js is not a thing anymore, we're now migrating to the next thing, because, you know, this does this better.
Yeah, I hope not, but as a developer who has to keep up with it, but yeah. Yeah, okay. I mean, okay. Do you have any thoughts more in general about the current state of the web? Has the functionality that's needed already been created for the most part? Now it's just a matter of improving things.
I think so. I think like the certain technologies that, you know, are not quite fit for purpose and need to, you know, evolve further. You know, I think the fact that, you know, the web is, you know, built on like, a standards committee, like, make sure, I mean, I think that can slow the process down, but I think the stuff we end up with is better for everyone. I know, yeah, I really think a lot of the stuff like, browsers are doing is looking at how people are developing and think, well, how can we simplify this? So the platform's going to continue to evolve, I think, and get better. Like I know Google is thinking about this from the Chrome perspective, at least, like how can we, save like web developers a lot of time and build in simple, like, interface controls. So yeah, I think the platform is definitely in a stable thing. Like really, it's just kind of about everyone else catching up with the platform at this point, I feel. I think startups have the same issue that that our movement does. Like even though like they're much shorter frame of time, like they might like they like maybe build something in 2 years, they still have the same tech debt because they're rushing to like get built and make sure like they get they get the next round of funding, kind of deliver value. So I think when they do get that value and they kind of prove themselves, they're kind of left with the tech debt they've accumulated to move fast. Yeah, I think to me that's the issue, is like how do we shift this culture of building software to be more about building things that last rather than things that get built quickly but have flawed issues. I mean, Twitter's a great example, right, where like there's like a lot of issues around like harassment, for example, and those weren't thought of early on. Like I'm sure there was a developer in the room like who was saying these things, but that person probably got told to quiet down because we need to focus on these issues instead. Like we need to deliver this value. So I think at least we're in a unique position like in our movement because our values are very different from say a for-profit. I do hope that at least going forward we can maybe do things the right way rather than the quick way.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, if you looking back on what you wrote, do you still believe in that time frame, or do you agree that we're basically already in the refactoring era?
I think, yeah, I don't know the time frame, but yeah, it does feel like we're going to be there for some time. I think particularly like there's always this trade-off, right? Like, do you focus on dealing with technical debt or do you focus on user value? And I think to me the correct answer should be both. But I think in practice maybe that's not what happens. Maybe the user value is the focus, and that stuff piles up. So I think that's what I was getting to that blog post and that tweet, is like we need to talk about the stuff and get more effective at it. I think the problem with this is a benefit of being at a company for 8 years. Like, I mean, most people don't stay at companies for 8 years. They leave after like 2 years. They maybe do something, they get something out of the experience and move on somewhere else. And then they never see the kind of tail end of the stuff they created. They're never involved in those those projects where they have to rewrite that stuff they did. So I feel quite fortunate to have had that kind of time here to kind of look at a project from a kind of bigger perspective and think, okay, this is what happens. And certainly like in the early days, in the early days of mobile front end, it was definitely user value, user value, user value. Let's get this thing out the door as quick as possible. Like, I mean,
yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to assign to say one is wrong and the other is right, because it really depends, and obviously when you're putting out your first version of something, it can be very helpful in terms of getting user feedback and seeing what actually works.
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah.
Even if it's not, even if it looks like crap on the back end.
That's with everything, it depends.
Sure.
If you're gonna put it in, if you're gonna like stop touching the code for like if you're planning to like leave the code there for 6 months, like maybe don't stick that in production, especially if it's like out to like millions of users. Like, but if you've got a plan for dealing with that, then sure.
Yeah. Wait. You're saying sorry, you're saying if you know that the code is not going to get improved, then make sure it's good the first time.
I mean, if you're a developer and you've built something like from your perspective, like the backend's terrible, you know what the issues are, you wrote it for whatever reason. Like, I think there's an element of like, what is the impact of doing this? Like, what is the consequences of say like delivering this to users early? Like, how is that going to bite someone later? I mean, if your plan is to like, build something and then, as I say, change jobs, maybe you don't care about that, but if you're gonna be around, like you're gonna be that person. Like, so it's like you're basically taking time away from your future self for building something more enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, yeah, and of course, there's gray areas. I mean, if you've cut corners on accessibility or an internationalization or that kind of thing, then there's people who are impacted by that. From the beginning,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
just a theoretical discussion. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, there's also so many things you can work on. It's like, well, how do you choose the right things to focus on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I, yeah. Well, actually, that's an interesting question. I mean, to what extent are you actually um, do you actually make those kinds of decisions, or is it people above you in the hierarchy, or is it more just based on user feedback and that kind of thing?
Um, yeah, it's a mixture. And it really depends on the situation. But I do think like, one of the obvious ways like products get influenced is when community members like shout about something. So if there's a village pump discussion saying this thing is terrible, it needs to be fixed. We get word of that, and probably that will get prioritized. But it doesn't mean it's the most important thing that we could work on. Like, I mean, there's like, I think right now that someone did a drive-by fabricator comment this week on there's an open ticket about categories on mobile, because right now they're not shown like unless you're
Oh,
opted into a specific
yeah,
mode
that's
of the
right.
brand.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's definitely a problem. It needs to be addressed, but it's like in the grand scheme of things, like it's probably not our biggest problem. I understand like to some people it might be a bigger problem. Particularly if you're, someone who just edits categories, that's all you do, it's gonna be a bigger deal to
Yeah,
you.
sure. If they're out on
Um,
the road, they can't do anything. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, but then
yeah,
there's a trade-off. It's like, well, we can fix this feature like in, the smallest way possible and get that feature out the door and usable. But it might be a terrible experience on mobile. Or we can do it properly, which might take time and thought and multidisciplinary like input from designers and engineers. And I think we tend to kind of gravitate towards the latter, because the thing is, like, if you make like bad code tends to hang around. You turn something on, it's going to be there probably in 3 years' time, like, and just as bad. Like, so why not do it, properly in the first place? Yeah, so that answers the
yeah.
question, but it's a big
Ye-
topic.
It is a big topic. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. No, it all
Yeah,
ties
but
in.
yeah, but I think in terms of like in the team, like we do talk about things like so accessibility. Like we have a lot of experts in that in our team, and they kind of raise concerns about interfaces. But there might be a few cases where you're looking to actually, like, from a code perspective, it's going to be like quite a lot of work to do that, and maybe like the gain is small for the end user. We have to kind of balance and go, well, I mean, maybe this is something for a rainy day when we actually have this time. Maybe there's something else we could look at for now.
Yeah,
But definitely usually a team decision. Like, like if a designer's like, sometimes a designer like is really upset about something, and sometimes the engineers like are not upset about it at all. But there's some, if it's a design problem, probably the designer's the person to listen to in that situation.
oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Wait, they're a graphic designer or a UX designer?
I think it's a UX designer,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes more
so
sense. Yeah.
Alex Hollander is on our team. He's our designer that did resource, but there's like a larger team of designers at the foundation that you can pull for expertise on more complicated things.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Um. Well, great. Yeah, I think that answers the question. I mean, do you think? I don't know. Is to pile speculation onto speculation. I mean, do you think once all this, forget it. Do you know anything about WordPress and Drupal, by the way? That the whole world is, do they also deal with technical debt? Or just to pick two the
Um,
most well-known open source projects, web
I,
projects.
I've dabbled more in WordPress. Like I've used WordPress for blogs. A while back, as an experiment, I used some of my free time to volunteer in one of their projects. Um, which was interesting. So I kind of went into that project without I didn't want to kind of say I'm from, I work for Wikimedia. I just kind of wanted to anonymously like contribute and see what the experience was. And I don't know, I discovered some of the same issues that we have. Like I pushed pull requests and they were open like 2 weeks later and no one had commented. And I think like a few months later, someone commented and said, you should have done this. Like you could have pinged these people. And as a volunteer, I'm thinking, well, I could have, but like, that's not my job. Like, if you want a healthy community, you need to be better at like doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we have that same problem. Like we have like patch sets that end up sitting there for ages without anyone looking at them. So, I mean, at least for stuff at least for projects I maintain, I'm always making sure there's at least a comment on that. So the person's not doesn't feel like they posted something, there's like radio silence. And that's really important. Yeah, and I haven't used Drupal, but I've definitely seen a few blog posts about migrating things from one thing to another. I think actually one of our team members who just joined recently, like has worked with Drupal, so I should probably like talk to her about her experience.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure they're very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense, especially with the introduction of these new JavaScript frameworks and so forth. Everyone's trying to hop onto that bandwagon or something.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I think we're making slow progress. I think front end's always had like kind of a few unanswered questions, and it's definitely getting easier and clearer, like how to build stuff. I think everyone's still learning as we go along, like the best way to make front ends like the last.
Yeah. Here's a random question that sort of ties in, sort of doesn't. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, you have to create MediaWiki again from scratch. Mm-hmm. You don't have access to the original source code, but you have full access to the interface. So you know exactly what it's supposed to look like. What language would you or languages would you create it in?
Well, I think again it depends. I mean, I think if it was just me building this, it's probably going to end up being in like Node.js, just because that's what I'm familiar with. I think one of the benefits of using Node.js is you have like the same language on the front end and the back end.
Yeah.
It'd probably be like a single page application. Right. That would be kind of the starting point, I think, about it from that perspective, and probably API driven. But yeah, I don't know, just having me do that would be terrible. Like you'd probably want someone with a bit of expertise, like on things like performance and making it scale. I don't think I'd trust it like a front end engineer like myself.
Well, here's the follow-up question. Let's say you have a team of 50 competent developers working with you on it. How long do you think it would take to fully recreate the functionality?
How much time we got? Yeah, I think the challenge here, right, is like, I mean, I'm still learning stuff about the MediaWiki universe. Like even after being here for 8 years, like working on it full time, like there's still stuff like that surprises me. I'm like, oh, that exists. Oh, okay, interesting. Like things like page triage, for example, like came across a bug in that recently. Like I know nothing about that extension or how it works. And each of these like is code. And if you're just talking about MediaWiki core, like forget all extensions.
Yeah, okay, right. That certainly makes it easier. I guess I was thinking core MediaWiki plus all the Wikimedia extensions, visual editor, and all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a case of prioritizing, right? You'd have to say, okay, what's the key functionality like? And it's kind of the approach we took with the mobile site, to be honest. Like we did kind of build that from nothing. It was like, I think when I first came in, we didn't even use resource loader for the mobile site. It's a single JavaScript file that was added to the page. And all it did was like add collapsible sections. So I think like really it's always just the case of like what's a priority or what's going to have the biggest impact here. So probably with something like MediaWiki, like first things first, you need some way of editing and viewing that page. So that'd probably be like day one working on that. But yeah, I think one of the challenges with MediaWiki, we didn't have the source code though, is there's so many different experiences depending on your user rights and what kind of user you are. So I think we forget that most of the time. If you're not an admin like on English Wikipedia, you're not going to see the move and delete functions on pages. for example. You probably don't know they're there until you start digging in the code or like running a local instance.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Let's say you can see. Let's say you can view the code. I said that just to get rid of the natural advantage that PHP would have in that case. But if you're not using PHP, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think the language really is yeah. I don't have too many views on that. I think typically when projects get started, they will be built in the language that the team prefers. Like ultimately, like if you go into a project and you've got experience with Ruby, probably get written in Ruby.
Yeah. Sure. Right. Yeah. But that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, a single page application. That's makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, the reason I bring that up, one of the challenges we have right now is we're using Vue.js. Vue.js is obviously like a JavaScript library. So it creates a few challenges when you want to render that in PHP. So typically the way they recommend doing that is you have a Node.js server that you tunnel out to and say, give me the output, like as if you're an API, and I'll render that. And that doesn't really scale, is my understanding, for our architecture process.
Yeah. Oh well. And plus there's so much effort expended to get rid of the Node.js dependency in the first place. But yeah, okay. I think that's pretty much all my questions. How have you been doing with this lockdown? We're seeing the end of the tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel, maybe.
Yeah, I might be getting my jab this week, so that's kind of a nice kind of thing to.
You might be what?
Getting my first jab, my vaccinations.
I see. Okay, nice.
So that feels like a milestone, and I have like a basketball group I meet with on Sundays, which hasn't met like since April last year, and I noticed there was a first message in the Facebook group this week about meeting up, because a few people got a vaccination. So it does feel like we're getting there. But yeah, I think for me the struggle has been like I'm in the US and most of my family is in Singapore and the UK, so that's been a bit of a struggle, like kind of being away from them for so long. Like usually I try and visit at least once a year, not twice. So yeah, that's definitely taken some adapting to.
Yeah. Okay. And well, no immediate plans to go traveling again. Well, anything can happen then.
Yeah, and probably not for a while. Like I think, kind of monitoring the situations in England, Singapore. I think Singapore, you have to like spend 2 weeks in a hotel before, and you can't actually leave that hotel room.
Okay, yeah.
So like, I don't know. I like hotels, but not that much.
All right, very good. Well, yeah. This was a great discussion. We covered a lot of stuff. Yeah, thanks, John, for coming on the program. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.